Way Station Olka smelled like engine grease and old food. The kind of smell that stuck to your clothes and followed you for days. It was a massive station, older than most governments in this part of the galaxy, and it floated in the empty dark between three territories that all pretended they didn't own it. That made it perfect for people who didn't want to be found. Tejo walked through the lower deck corridor with his hands in his jacket pockets and his eyes straight ahead. He moved the way he always moved in places like this. Calm, steady, like he belonged, but didn't care to prove it. Beside him, Hana matched his pace, her boots clicking softly against the metal floor. She was shorter than him by a full head, but she carried herself like someone who had walked through worse places than this and come out the other side without a scratch. They didn't look like what they were. That was the point. Both of them wore biometric dampener masks. The devices sat under their skin like a second face, projecting the appearance of a species called the Fenari. Tall, thin, pale, with flat features and soft round eyes. The Fenari were herbivores from a garden world on the far side of the Orion Arm. They were known for being polite, quiet, and completely harmless. Nobody looked twice at a Fenari. Nobody felt threatened by one. That was exactly why Tejo and Hana had chosen to look like them. Underneath the masks, they were something else entirely. They reached a door at the end of the corridor. A sign above it flickered in 3 different languages, but the most readable one said, "The Rust Lung," in Galactic Common. It was a bar, the kind of bar where you didn't ask anyone their name, and you kept your back to the wall if you had any sense. Tejo pushed the door open and stepped inside. The noise hit him first. Voices layered on top of each other in a dozen different languages. The hum of a broken air recycler that nobody had bothered to fix. The bar was wide and low-ceilinged, packed with bodies of every shape and size. Tall insectoid creatures stood in clusters near the walls. A group of squat gray-skinned traders argued over a datapad at a corner table. Somewhere near the back, someone was laughing too loud. Tejo found a spot at the bar and sat down. Hana sat beside him. The bartender noticed them almost immediately. He was a piliki, a small feathered creature that barely reached Tejo's chest. His name was Runo, and his big dark eyes blinked rapidly as he shuffled over, wiping a glass with a cloth that was dirtier than the glass itself. "What can I get you to?" Runo asked. His voice was high and quick, like a bird trying to speak before it forgot what it wanted to say. "2 of whatever won't kill us," Hana said. Runo let out a nervous laugh and poured 2 cups of something pale yellow. He slid them across the counter. "You're Fenari, yes? Don't see many of your kind out here. Brave of you." "Or stupid," Tejo said quietly. He picked up the cup and took a sip. It tasted like warm metal, but it was drinkable. They were here to meet a contact, a smuggler named Pilko, who owed them payment for a cargo delivery they'd completed 2 cycles ago. Pilko was late, which was not unusual. Pilko was always late. Tejo didn't mind waiting. He had learned a long time ago that waiting was just another form of watching, and watching was how you stayed alive. He let his eyes move across the bar without turning his head. He noted the exits, 2, one behind the bar, one at the main entrance. He counted the armed patrons, at least 9, probably more. He measured the distance between his seat and the nearest cover, a thick metal support column about 4 steps to his left. The kind that never really left, no matter how far you traveled, from the place that built them into your bones. Then the noise at the back of the bar got louder. Tejo looked. A large group had gathered around a wide table near the far wall. At the center of the group sat a creature that made the rest of the bar seem small. He was Dasari, nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms, each one thick with muscle and covered in dark green scales. His head was broad and flat, with deep-set eyes, the color of burnt copper. He wore armor across his chest and shoulders, scarred and dented from use. And when he spoke, his voice filled the room like a drum. His name was Vel. Tejo didn't know that yet, but he would. Vel was telling a story. He had the kind of voice that demanded attention, and the kind of personality that punished you if you didn't give it. His crew sat around him, laughing when he laughed, nodding when he paused, filling his cup before it was empty. He was their captain, their leader, and right now he was their entertainer. So there we were, Vel said, slamming one of his 4 fists on the table, hard enough to rattle every glass on it. 3 ships, middle of the Helix corridor, and this human transport just sitting there, engines dead, drifting like a wounded animal. The bar got a little quieter. Not silent, but quieter. The word human did that. It moved through a room like a cold wind. They tried to run? Can you imagine? Val laughed. It was a big ugly laugh. Where were they going to go? We boarded in under 6 minutes. And then, then the fun started. Tejo's hand found his glass. He held it loosely, but his fingers didn't move. Vel leaned forward, his copper eyes wide with the pleasure of his own memory. Humans are tough, I'll give them that. One of them, shot twice in the chest, still got back up and came at my crew, with nothing but his bare hands. Took 3 of my boys to put him down again. They just don't stop, like machines made of meat. Some of the bar laughed, others didn't. But they break, Vel continued, his voice dropping lower. Everything breaks. You just need to know where to hit. And I know where to hit. He held up his primary right hand and flexed the clawed fingers. 6 of them. I killed 6 of them on that ship with these hands. One of them was the guard for a group of children in the lower hold. Shot him in the legs, and he still tried to crawl toward me, dragging himself across the floor with his fingers, leaving a red trail behind him like some kind of animal. The pale yellow drink leaked slowly through the fracture, pooling on the bar surface like something bleeding out. Hana placed her hand on his arm. She didn't squeeze. She didn't say anything. She just rested it there, warm and steady, and that single point of contact said everything that needed to be said. Not here, not now. Tejo exhaled slowly through his nose. He loosened his grip. The glass stayed cracked. The drink kept leaking. Runo noticed and stared at the fracture with wide, confused eyes, because no Fenari alive had the grip strength to crack a bar glass made of compressed silicate. Tejo didn't explain. He set the glass down gently, as if it were something precious, and folded his hands on the bar. Across the room, Vel called for another drink and began a new story. His crew cheered. The bar started breathing again. People looked away, relieved that the moment had passed, grateful that they were not the ones being talked about. Tejo sat still. Hana kept her hand on his arm. And somewhere beneath the projected mask of a harmless plant-eating alien, a pair of dark human eyes watched the killer at the far table with a patience that had been trained into them by blood, by fire, and by a world that had spent 4 billion years teaching its children how to survive anything. The night was still young, and the quiet ones were always the most dangerous. An hour passed, then another. The bar didn't get quieter, it got worse. Vel had found his rhythm. He was the kind of creature who fed on attention the way a fire fed on air, and the more he talked, the bigger he burned. His crew kept his cup full. The patrons around him either listened out of interest or out of fear, and Vel didn't care which one it was, as long as they listened. Tejo hadn't moved. He sat at the bar with a fresh glass in front of him, this one uncracked, and he watched. Not obviously, not the way a soldier watches. He watched the way a stone watches a river, still and patient and remembering everything that passes by. Hana sat beside him, her fingers moving beneath the edge of her sleeve. She wore a thin data console strapped to the inside of her wrist, hidden under the fabric of her Fenari clothing. It was old tech, modified for silence. No light, no sound. Just a tiny screen that only she could see, and a direct link to every intelligence database that Earth's Galactic Affairs Bureau had built over the last 20 years. She was working. Even when she looked like she was doing nothing, Hana was always working. Vel stood up from his chair, and the table shook under the weight of his movement. He was drunker now. His copper eyes were glassy, and his words came out louder than before, rougher at the edges. He reached down to his belt and unclipped a leather pouch. It was old and stained, and when he opened it and poured the contents onto the table, the objects that fell out made a small, sharp sound against the metal surface. Trophies. There were teeth. Small ones, from species Tejo didn't recognize. There were claws, a set of polished bones strung together on a wire, and a handful of metal tags. The kind soldiers wore around their necks. Tejo's stomach turned, but his face didn't change. Vel picked up the tags and held them up for the bar to see. Human military. Republic of something. Found these on one of the soldiers from the transport. He was already dead when I took them, but I like to think he knew. He dropped them back on the pile and laughed. Then he reached into the pouch one more time and pulled out something smaller. A wristband. It was dark gray, made of woven fiber, and across its surface, stitched in thread that had once been white, but was now brown with age and something darker, were characters. Korean characters. Tejo's breath stopped. He knew that wristband. He knew it the way you know your own name, or the sound of your mother's voice. He had seen it 1,000 times before, wrapped around a wrist that was thicker than his own, attached to a man who laughed too loud, and ate too fast, and always volunteered for the worst shifts, because he said somebody had to. The wristband belonged to Dowan, Staff Sergeant Dowan, Republic of Korea Marine Corps, 1st Division, attached to the Galactic Escort Fleet, Tejo's squadmate, his brother, not by blood, but by everything else that mattered. Dowan had a wide face, and a gap between his front teeth, and a daughter named Yuna, who was 4 years old when he shipped out on the refugee escort mission that was supposed to bring 300 civilians safely to the colony at New Busan. The mission was listed as lost. That was the official word. Lost to unknown causes. The ship disappeared somewhere in the Helix corridor, and no wreckage was ever found. Earth Command had marked it as a navigation failure. Case closed. Tejo had attended the memorial. He had stood in a room full of families and watched Dowan's wife hold their daughter and tell her that her father got lost among the stars, and that maybe one day they would find him. Now Tejo was looking at Dowan's wristband in the hands of the creature who had killed him. The world became very small. The noise of the bar shrank to a thin, distant hum. Tejo could feel his heartbeat in his neck, slow and heavy, like a drum counting down to something. His hands were flat on the bar surface. He pressed them down, hard, because if he didn't, they would close into fists. And if they closed into fists, he wasn't sure he could stop what would happen next. Hana saw it. She always saw it. She looked at his face, then followed his eyes to the wristband, and then she understood. Her fingers stopped moving beneath her sleeve. For one long second, she was completely still. Then she started working again, faster this time. She cross-referenced Vel's physical description and ship signature against the Bureau's database of known raids and attacks in the Helix corridor over the past 3 years. The data came back in pieces, but the pieces fit together like broken glass, forming a picture you didn't want to see. Vel's ship, the Iron Fang, was linked to at least 4 confirmed attacks on human vessels. 2 cargo transports, 1 medical supply ship, and 1 refugee escort. The escort had been carrying 312 civilians and a security detail of 24 Marines. There were no survivors on record. Dowan had been one of the 24. Hana placed her hand on Tejo's knee beneath the bar counter. She tapped twice. It was their old signal, quick and light, and it meant the same thing it had always meant since the first day they started working together. Be careful. Someone is watching. Taiho didn't react outwardly, but his eyes shifted. Across the room, behind Vel's crew, a second Dasari stood near the wall. He was smaller than Vel, leaner, with lighter scales, and a calm expression that didn't match the chaos around him. His name was Das, and he was Vel's second in command, though you wouldn't know it from looking at him. Where Vel was loud and heavy, Das was quiet and sharp. He stood with his upper arms folded, and his lower arms resting at his sides, and he was watching Taiho. Not casually, not the way you watch a stranger across a bar. He was watching the way someone watches a locked door that shouldn't be making noise. In Das's lower right hand, half hidden behind his hip, Taiho could see the faint glow of a scanning device. Small, portable, the kind bounty hunters and security officers used to read biological signatures through walls and disguises. He was scanning them. Hana's console pulsed against her wrist. She glanced down. The scan had pinged her dampener field. It hadn't broken through, not yet, but it had touched it, and that touch left a trace. She tapped Taiho's knee again, twice. Taiho understood. They were being examined. Das hadn't figured it out yet, but he had noticed something wrong, and wrong was all it took for a careful mind to start asking dangerous questions. Vel's voice cut through the bar again. He had noticed Taiho too, though for a very different reason. To Vel, the tall, pale Fenari at the bar was just another face in the crowd, another weak thing in a room full of weak things. And the fact that this one hadn't looked away when Vel was speaking was either amusing or insulting. "Hey, grass eater," Vel pointed at Taiho with one of his 4 massive hands. "You've been staring at me for an hour. What's the matter? Never seen a real killer before?" The bar shifted its attention. Eyes moved to Taiho. The room felt smaller. Taiho turned his head slowly and looked at Vel. He didn't smile. He didn't do any of the things a Fenari was supposed to do when a predator species addressed them directly. He didn't lower his gaze. He didn't stammer. He didn't shrink. "I've seen plenty," Taiho said. His voice was level, flat, calm in a way that was not calm at all, the way the surface of deep water is calm because the current underneath is strong enough to drown you. Vel stared at him for a moment, then burst out laughing. "Plenty," he says. "Did you hear that? The plant eater has seen plenty." His crew laughed with him, and the moment passed. Vel turned back to his table and reached for his cup. But Das didn't laugh. Das stood by the wall with his scanner still glowing in his hand, and his eyes stayed on Taiho for a long time after the laughter had faded. Fenari didn't say things like that. Fenari didn't hold eye contact with Dasari warlords in crowded bars. Fenari didn't have grip strength that could crack compressed silicate glasses, and they didn't sit with their weight balanced on the balls of their feet the way fighters did. Something was wrong with the tall one. Das didn't know what it was yet, but he was going to find out. At the bar, Taiho turned back to his glass and lifted it to his mouth. His hand was steady. His heartbeat had returned to normal. But behind his eyes, something had changed. A decision had been made, quiet and final, the way decisions are made by men who have already lost something that cannot be given back. He wasn't leaving this station without Dowen's wristband, and he wasn't leaving Vel standing. They left the bar through the main door, walking at a pace that was quick enough to be purposeful, but slow enough to avoid looking like they were running. Taiho led. Hana followed half a step behind, her hand resting near the inside of her jacket, where she kept a compact pulse weapon strapped against her ribs. The corridor outside was dimmer than the bar. The station's lighting had entered its night cycle, which meant the overhead panels gave off a low orange glow that made everything look like it was rusting. The air tasted recycled and stale. the kind of air that had been breathed by too many lungs and cleaned by machines that were too old to do the job properly. They didn't speak until they were 2 full sections away from the rust lung. Hana broke first. "We need to leave." Teho kept walking. "Teho, we need to report this. Earth Command has a patrol squadron within a 3-day jump. We send a tight beam. They respond. They come here and they take Vel and his entire crew apart piece by piece, through proper channels. That is the smart move. That is what we trained for." "I know what we trained for," Teho said. "Then act like it." He stopped. They were standing in a junction between 2 corridors, beneath a broken sign that pointed toward the upper decks. The station hummed around them. Somewhere deep in the walls, pipes groaned, and something dripped. Teho turned to face her. In the orange light, his Fenari disguise made him look like a ghost, pale and thin and wrong, but his eyes, even behind the projected mask, were entirely his own, dark, steady, burning with something that had been buried for 2 years, and had just been dug up with 4 clawed hands and a leather pouch full of dead men's things. "Dowan had a daughter," Teho said. "Her name is Yuna. She was 4 when he shipped out. She lives with her mother, in a housing block on New Busan. And every night before bed, her mother tells her that her father got lost among the stars, like a fairy tale, like something beautiful and sad that you tell a child so they can sleep." Hana didn't interrupt. "He didn't get lost, Hana. He got butchered, on a ship full of civilians, on a mission that was supposed to bring families to safety. And that thing in there, that 4-armed animal, is wearing his name on its wrist and using his memory as a drinking story." His voice hadn't risen. That was the thing about Teho. The angrier he got, the quieter he became. It was something Hana had noticed early in their partnership and had never stopped being unsettled by. Most people got loud when they were angry. Teho got precise. Hana exhaled. She looked at the ceiling, then at the floor, then at him. "If we move on Vel now, we blow our cover. Not just here. Everywhere. Every alias, every contact, every channel we've built over the past year. The anti-trafficking network, the informant chain, all of it, gone. I know. Do you? Because this isn't just about us. There are other agents out there using the same network. If our cover breaks, theirs might too. Then we do it without breaking cover." Hana looked at him for a long time. She was searching his face for the thing she was afraid to find. The thing that told her he had already decided, and nothing she said would change it. She found it. She sighed. It was not a sigh of defeat. It was a sigh of acceptance. The kind of breath you take before you jump off something high, knowing the fall is coming, and choosing to fall well. "All right," she said. "But if we're doing this, we're doing it smart. My way." Teho nodded. They moved to the upper observation deck. The deck was a wide, curved platform with a transparent wall that looked out into open space. Stars scattered across the black like dust on a dark floor. In the distance, the faint blue glow of a nebula painted the edge of the view with color. It was beautiful, if you had time to notice. Hana pulled up the station's structural schematics on her wrist console. She had acquired them months ago during a previous visit, stored in an encrypted partition that only her biometrics could unlock. The schematics showed everything: corridors, maintenance tunnels, docking bays, power conduits, communication relays, and most importantly, the location and access codes for the station's docking clamp controls. "Vel's ship is the Iron Fang," she said, projecting the layout into the air between them in a faint blue light. "Docked at Bay 14, lower starboard. If we lock the docking clamps remotely, his ship can't leave. If we broadcast his crew's crime records on the station authority channel, the whole station knows who he is. And if I can get access to the long-range communication array, I can send a tight beam to the nearest Earth Command vessel." Teho studied the layout. How long for the patrol to arrive? 18 hours. Maybe less if they push the drive. That's a long time to hold a station. We don't hold the station. We hold Vel. His crew is 7, maybe 8. Most of them are muscle. Das is the only smart one, and I don't think Das is as loyal as Vel thinks he is. Tejo looked at her. What makes you say that? Before Hana could answer, a voice came from behind them. Because he isn't. They both turned. Das was standing at the entrance to the observation deck. He had come quietly, the way large creatures shouldn't be able to move, but sometimes did. His scales caught the dim light in thin lines, and his forearms hung loose at his sides. He didn't look aggressive. He looked tired. Tejo shifted his weight. Hana's hand moved toward her jacket. Das raised his upper right hand, palm open. A gesture of peace, or at least a gesture that wanted to look like one. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to talk. About what? Hana said. Her voice was neutral, but her body was not. Das stepped forward slowly, stopping at the railing that ran along the observation window. He looked out at the stars for a moment, then back at them. My scanner returned inconclusive results on both of you. That's unusual. Fenari biology is simple. Clean readings every time. But your readings came back foggy. Layered. Like there's something underneath. He paused. So I'll ask once, politely. What subspecies of Fenari are you? Hana didn't hesitate. Outer colony variant, Fenari Sec. Settled on the moons of Pelos III about a century ago. Slightly different bone density due to the higher gravity. It plays strange with standard scanners. Das considered this. His expression didn't change. He was not the kind of creature who showed what he was thinking. After a moment, he nodded slowly. Maybe that's what it is. But he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the railing and spoke again, quieter this time, as if the stars were listening and he didn't want them to hear. Vel is getting worse. Every station we visit, the stories get bigger, the trophies get newer. He's not a warrior. He hasn't been one for a long time. He's just a loud thing with a ship and a crew that's too scared to say no. He looked at Tejo directly. I've been with him for 5 years. I've seen what he does. I've helped him do it. And I'm tired. The admission hung in the air. I'm telling you this because something about you two doesn't feel right. And I think you know it doesn't feel right. And I think you're here for reasons that have nothing to do with cargo or trade. Tejo said nothing. Das straightened up and turned toward the exit. Whatever you are, leave before morning. Vel wakes up angry, and when he's angry, he looks for things to break. He paused at the doorway. He collects trophies from things that scare him, and right now, something about you two is scaring him. He just doesn't know it yet. Then Das was gone. His footsteps faded down the corridor, and the observation deck was quiet again. Tejo stood still for a long time, staring at the place where Das had been. Then he looked at Hana. He told us to leave, Hana said. I heard him. And, somewhere out there, past the nebula and the trade lanes and the empty corridors of dead space, there was a small housing block on a colony called New Busan, and inside it, a 6-year-old girl was sleeping under a ceiling painted with stars, dreaming about a father who was never coming home. I'm not leaving, Tejo said. Hana closed her eyes. She took a long breath, and when she opened them again, she was already pulling up the schematics. Then we move tomorrow. Day cycle, when the bar is full and the exits are watched. She looked at him, and for the first time that night, something fierce moved behind her calm expression. If we're going to do this, the whole station is going to see it, and they're going to remember. That was enough. They spent the rest of the night on the observation deck, planning in whispers, while the stars turned slowly outside the window, and the station slept around them, unaware that morning was going to bring something it hadn't seen in a very long time. A human, unmasked, with nothing left to lose, and everything left to remember. Morning came to Waystation Olka, the way it always did. The overhead lights shifted from dim orange to flat white. The ventilation fans kicked up a notch, and the corridors filled with the sounds of a station waking up badly. Doors opened. Boots hit metal. Somewhere on the lower decks, an argument that had probably started the night before picked up exactly where it left off. Tejo didn't sleep. He sat on the floor of the observation deck, with his back against the wall, and his eyes open, running through the plan in his mind over and over, until every step was clean and clear and automatic. Hana slept for 2 hours, curled up on a bench, with her jacket folded under her head. But even in sleep, her hand stayed near the weapon under her ribs. Old habits. She woke before the lights changed. She looked at Tejo, and he looked at her, and neither of them said good morning, because there was nothing good about it. They just stood up and started moving. She took a maintenance corridor that led to the station's communication relay on the upper decks. Her job was precise and technical. She needed access to the long-range array to send a tight beam message to Earth Command's nearest patrol vessel. And she needed access to the docking clamp controls to lock the Iron Fang in its bay. Both systems were behind encrypted panels that required authorization codes she didn't have. But Hana had been breaking into systems since she was 19 years old, and a rusting station with 20-year-old security was not going to slow her down. Tejo went to the bar. The rust lung was already open. It never really closed. The same broken air recycler hummed in the ceiling. The same stains darkened the floor. Runo the Peliki was behind the counter, polishing glasses with the same dirty cloth, his feathers flat against his small body, like a bird that expected rain. The bar was half full. Traders, smugglers, off-duty dockworkers, and at the far table, exactly where Tejo expected him to be, sat Vel. The Dasari warlord looked worse in the daylight. His scales were dull, his eyes were rimmed with red, and his movements were slower, heavier, as if gravity had gained a few points overnight. He was playing a card game with 3 members of his crew. The cards were flat metal chips that changed color when you touched them, and the game involved lying, which meant Vel was good at it. Tejo walked across the bar. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look around. He walked straight to Vel's table and stopped at the empty chair. "Room for one more?" he said. Vel looked up. His copper eyes narrowed, then widened with recognition. "The grass-eater. From last night. You're still here." He grinned, showing a row of teeth that were too wide and too sharp for a face that was already ugly. "Sit, sit. I like brave food." His crew laughed. Tejo sat. Tejo had never played it before, but he understood it within 3 hands. It was a bluffing game, built on patterns and pressure, and the key to winning was not the cards you held, but the fear you caused. The strong players bet big and stared down their opponents. The weak players folded early and apologized. Tejo did neither. He played flat. He bet steadily, never too much, never too little. He watched every hand that was played and remembered every card that was shown. He tracked patterns. He counted probabilities. And when the moment came to push, he pushed. He won the 4th hand, then the 6th, then the 8th. Vel stopped smiling after the 10th. The bar had started to notice. People drifted closer, drinks in hand, watching the strange sight of a Fenari beating a Dasari warlord at his own table. It was like watching a rabbit outrun a wolf. It shouldn't happen, but it was happening. Vel's crew shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a thick-necked alien with blue-gray skin and too many scars, glanced at Vel the way you glance at a storm cloud, waiting for thunder. Vel threw down his cards after losing another hand and reached for his drink. He drained it in one swallow and slammed the cup on the table hard enough to dent the surface. "Luck," he said. "Nothing but luck." Tejo gathered his winnings. He didn't count them. He didn't need to. The chips weren't why he was here. Vel leaned back in his chair, and the chair groaned under his weight. He was angry, but he was also curious, and curiosity was a dangerous thing in a creature that solved most problems with its fists. He studied Taeho with those burnt copper eyes, and then he did what he always did when he felt small. He made himself big. "Let me tell you a story, Grass-Eater," Vel said, loud enough for the bar to hear, "since you seem to enjoy sitting at the big table." Taeho didn't move. "I once caught a human alive," Vel said. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something low and thick, like oil dripping on stone. Not on a ship, on a station like this one. He was hiding, pretending to be something he wasn't. Wearing a mask, can you imagine? A human, hiding behind a fake face, thinking nobody would notice. The bar went quiet. Not the nervous quiet of last night. A different kind. A heavy kind. I found him. I always find them. And when I pulled the mask off and saw what was underneath, I thought to myself, so this is what a Deathworlder looks like when it's scared. Vel paused. His eyes were locked on Taeho. I broke him over 3 days. Slowly. I wanted to see how long a human could last. You hear stories, you know, that they don't stop, that they keep going even when their body should quit. I wanted to test that. The answer is 72 hours. That's how long a human lasts before it stops being a person and starts being meat. The silence was absolute. Taeho set his cards down on the table. He set them down gently, one by one, the way you set down something you're about to walk away from forever. What was his name? Taeho asked. Vel blinked. The question caught him off guard, which was not easy to do. What? The human. The one you broke. What was his name? Vel stared at him. Then he laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was the kind of laugh that covered confusion. Why would I remember the name of livestock? Taeho smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in the entire time he had been on this station. It was a small smile, calm and certain, and it did not reach his eyes. His eyes stayed exactly where they were, dark and steady and locked onto Vel like targeting systems. Because he would have remembered yours. Something changed in the air. It was not visible. It was not a sound or a smell or a temperature shift. It was something older than all of those things. Something written into the genes of every creature in the galaxy that had ever been hunted. A signal, a warning, the kind that made your body want to run before your mind understood why. Vel felt it. His smile died on his face. His 4 hands went still. His scales tightened against his body. Deep in his brain, in the part that was older than language, older than thought, a single primal message lit up like a fire in a dark room. Danger. Move. Now. Taeho reached up with one hand and pressed his fingers against the side of his neck. There was a soft click. Then the air around his face rippled like water disturbed by a stone. The Fenari mask dissolved. It came apart in layers, like smoke blown away by wind. The pale, flat features melted. The soft, round eyes sharpened. The thin frame filled out, became broader, harder, heavier. The thing sitting in the chair across from Vel was not a Fenari. It had never been a Fenari. It was a man, a human man, broad-shouldered and scarred, with dark hair cut short, and dark eyes that held nothing in them that was soft. His jaw was set. His hands, now uncovered, were thick and calloused, the hands of someone who had spent a lifetime learning how to close them. A thin white scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his cheek, and it moved when he spoke. My name is Taeho, he said. His voice was the same. Calm, flat, final. Staff Sergeant, Republic of Korea Marine Corps, 1st Division. The bar erupted. Chairs fell. Bodies scrambled. A traitor near the door knocked over a table and ran. Two insectoid creatures pressed themselves flat against the walls, their legs clicking in panic. Someone screamed the word Deathworlder, and it spread through the room like a fire through dry grass. Runo dropped behind the counter so fast his feathers puffed out in every direction. But he didn't run. He peeked over the edge with his wide, dark eyes, and what was in them was not fear. It was something closer to awe. Vel lurched backward. His chair tipped and fell. He was on his feet, forearms wide, his hand reaching for the sidearm holstered on his hip. And then Hana's voice filled the station. It came through every speaker, every intercom, every public channel on Waystation Ulka. Clear, controlled. The voice of a woman who had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times. Attention Waystation Ulka. This is Agent Hana of Earth's Galactic Affairs Bureau. The crew of the vessel Ironfang, currently docked at Bay 14, is wanted for multiple counts of piracy, trafficking, and the murder of protected sapients, including citizens of Earth. Docking clamps have been locked. Station-wide lockdown is now in effect. A tight beam has been sent to Earth Command's patrol vessel Baco. Do not attempt to flee. Repeat, do not attempt to flee. The speakers hissed and went silent. Vel's hand found his weapon. He pulled it free. It was a heavy plasma pistol, scarred and dented like everything else he owned, and he aimed it at the human sitting at his table. Tejo didn't move. He looked at the barrel of the weapon, and then he looked past it, directly into Vel's eyes. You boasted about killing Deathworlders, Tejo said. He stood up from the chair, slowly, the way something stands when it has no reason to hurry. One was sitting right in front of you. Vel fired. The plasma bolt left the barrel in a white flash and crossed the distance between them in less time than it took to blink. It was aimed at center mass, at the widest part of the human's chest, and it was the kind of shot that killed most creatures in the galaxy before they even felt the heat. Tejo was already moving. Not backward, not sideways, forward. He dropped his shoulder and twisted his torso as the bolt passed. It caught the edge of his jacket and burned through the fabric, grazing the muscle beneath his left shoulder. The pain was sharp, bright, immediate. He didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He closed the distance between himself and Vel in 2 steps that covered more ground than they should have. Because humans didn't move the way other species expected. They moved fast when they were calm, and faster when they were not. And right now Tejo was something far beyond calm. He hit Vel at the wrist, not a punch. He grabbed the Dassary's primary right hand and rotated it inward with a grip that used Vel's own weight against him. The weapon came free and clattered to the floor. Vel's wrist bent at an angle that was wrong, and the sound it made was like a branch snapping in winter. Vel roared. It was a massive sound, the kind that shook the walls and vibrated in your chest. He swung with his second right arm, a wide, heavy blow aimed at Tejo's skull, and it connected. The impact sent a crack of pain through Tejo's jaw and rattled his teeth. Any other species would have gone down. A Fenari would have been dead. But Tejo was not a Fenari. He was a product of 4 billion years of survival on a world that had spent every single one of those years trying to kill everything living on it. He took the hit. His head turned with it. His feet didn't move. Then he answered. A palm strike to the throat, not a wild swing, not a haymaker. A precise, trained blow, delivered with the heel of his hand directly into the soft tissue below Vel's jaw. The Dasari's head snapped back. His legs folded. He dropped to his knees with a sound like a building settling. And for one long second, the most feared warlord on the station was on the floor, looking up at a creature half his size. 3 of Vel's crew came at once. They were big, they were armed, they were fast for their species. They were not fast enough. The first one reached Tejo with a curved blade. Tejo caught his arm, redirected the swing, and used the alien's own momentum to drive him into the second attacker. They both went down in a tangle of limbs and metal. The third came from behind with something heavy and blunt. Tejo heard him before he saw him. He ducked, and the weapon passed over his head, close enough to move his hair. He grabbed a chair from the nearest table and swung it into the attacker's midsection. The attacker didn't get up. It was not elegant. It was not graceful. There was no beauty in it, no choreography, no art. It was human fighting, dirty, adaptive, built on a million years of watching things try to kill you and learning from every single one of them. Tejo fought with whatever was closest. A bottle, a table edge, his elbow, his forehead. Every movement had a purpose. Every strike went somewhere it would matter. The first two crew members got to their feet and came again. Tejo met them in the middle of the bar. He broke one's knee with a low kick and put the other through a table with a throw that used the alien's weight like a lever. The table shattered. The alien stayed down. The entire fight lasted less than 90 seconds. When it was over, Tejo stood in the middle of the rust lung, breathing hard, his jacket burned, his knuckles split, blood on his face that might have been his and might not have been. Around him, Vel's crew lay on the floor in various states of damage. Some groaned, some didn't move at all. The bar was silent, except for the sound of broken glass settling, and the hum of the air recycler that had watched every bad thing that had ever happened in this room, and kept humming through all of them. Das stood near the exit. He had not moved. His forearms were folded, and his expression was the same as it had always been. Calm, quiet, unsurprised. One of Vel's crew, the one with the broken knee, looked at Das with desperate eyes and reached out a hand. Das shook his head. "I told him to leave it alone," he said to no one in particular. Then he turned and walked out of the bar. Tejo looked down at Vel. The warlord was on the floor, two arms broken, one twisted beneath him, and one hanging limp at his side. His breath came in short, wet gasps. There was something in them that Tejo had never seen in a Dasari's face before. Fear. Not the theatrical kind. Not the kind that came from watching a scary story. The real kind. The kind that came from understanding, finally and completely, that you were not what you thought you were. That you had never been what you thought you were. That the universe was full of things that were bigger and older and more dangerous than you. And one of them was standing over you, with blood on its hands and nothing in its eyes that looked like mercy. Tejo crouched down. He reached forward and pulled Dawan's wristband from Vel's belt. The leather strap came free easily. It was lighter than he expected. Such a small thing. A piece of woven fiber, with faded Korean characters stitched into it. It didn't look like something worth killing for. It didn't look like something worth dying for. But it was. He held it up so Vel could see the writing. His name was Dawan, Tejo said. Staff Sergeant, Republic of Korea Marine Corps. He was 31 years old. He liked bad food and terrible jokes, and he laughed louder than anyone I've ever known. He had a wife who loved him and a daughter named Yuna, who was 4 years old when he left and 6 years old right now. And she thinks her father got lost among the stars because nobody had the heart to tell her the truth. Tejo's voice was steady. Every word was clear. He was on that escort to protect 300 civilians, women, children, families trying to get to a new home. And you killed him. You killed him and took his name and wore it on your body like a decoration, and you told his story in bars to make yourself feel big. He stood up. You boasted about killing Deathworlders. You collected their teeth and their tags and their names. You thought you were the monster in every room you walked into. He looked down at Vel with eyes that held 2 years of grief, and a patience that had finally, completely reached its end. You weren't. He turned and walked away. He didn't look back. Behind the counter, Runo stood up slowly. His feathers were pressed flat against his body, and his big dark eyes were wet, but he was smiling. He didn't know why he was smiling. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was something else, something small and fierce that lived in the chest of every creature that had ever watched a bully fall. He didn't have a word for it, but he felt it. 1 week later, the Earth Command Patrol vessel Beko arrived at way station Ulka. It was a sleek, dark ship with the Republic of Korea's flag painted on its hull alongside the United Earth emblem. And when it docked, 32 armed Marines in full tactical gear walked through the corridors with the kind of quiet discipline that made every other creature on the station press themselves against the walls. Vel and his surviving crew were taken into custody. The evidence that Hana had compiled, 4 confirmed attacks, crew rosters, ship logs, communication records, and a leather pouch full of trophies that had once belonged to living people, was more than enough to ensure that Vel would never see open space again. Das was not among the arrested. He had left the station the night before, alone on a small transport with no name and no destination. Nobody tried to stop him. Nobody asked where he was going. Some debts are paid by walking away, and Das had been walking toward that door for 5 years. Taeho sat in the cargo hold of his ship. It was quiet. The engines were off, the lights were low. He held Dawen's wristband in both hands, turning it over slowly, reading the Korean characters for the 100th time, even though he had memorized them long ago. The characters read, "If lost, return to Yuna." It was a joke. Dawen had always said it was a joke. He had stitched it himself the night before shipping out, laughing as he pricked his fingers with the needle, saying that if he ever got lost, his daughter would be the one to find him. Taeho closed his eyes. He pressed the wristband against his forehead and held it there. He didn't cry. He had done his crying 2 years ago, in a small room on a station that looked a lot like this one, when the news came through that the escort was gone and everyone on it was dead. He had no tears left, but he had something else. A promise, unspoken but absolute, made to a dead man's memory in a bar that smelled like engine grease and old blood. Hana came into the cargo hold. She didn't say anything at first. She sat beside him on the metal bench, close enough that their shoulders touched, and she waited. She was good at waiting. It was one of the things Taeho respected most about her. She never rushed the things that mattered. After a long silence, Taeho spoke. "I'm going to find his daughter. I'm going to go to New Busan and sit down with his wife and tell her the truth. All of it. That he didn't get lost. That he fought. That he fought until his body couldn't move anymore. And even then, he tried. And I'm going to give Yuna this wristband and tell her that her father kept his promise. He found his way back to her." She put her hand on his arm, the same way she had in the bar, steady and warm and sure. "Then let's go home," she said. Taeho wrapped the wristband carefully around his own wrist and tied it tight. Then he stood up and walked to the cockpit. Hana followed. They powered up the engines, released the docking clamps, and pulled away from way station Ulka in a slow, clean arc that pointed them towards Seoul. Behind them, the station shrank to a point of light, and then to nothing. In the Ruslung, Runo was cleaning up. The tables were righted. The broken glass was swept. The blood was mostly gone, though the floor would carry the stains for a long time. He found Taeho's cracked glass still sitting on the bar where it had been left. The fracture ran from top to bottom, a clean split through compressed silicate that should have been impossible for a Finari to make. Runo picked it up carefully and turned it in his small feathered hands. The crack caught the glow and split it into 2 thin lines that ran parallel, like a road that went somewhere you couldn't see. He set the glass on a shelf behind the bar, between two bottles, in a spot where the light hit it just right. A patron came in later that day and pointed at it. "What's that?" Bruno looked at the glass. He looked at the crack. He thought about the tall, quiet man who had sat at his bar and held everything inside himself until the moment he chose to let it out, and how the whole station had shaken when he did. He smiled. "A reminder," he said, "that the quiet ones are the most dangerous." Then he went back to polishing his glasses with his dirty cloth, humming a song he didn't know the words to, while the stars turned slowly outside the window, and the galaxy went on being vast and dark, and full of things that had not yet learned what humans were capable of, when you gave them a reason to remember.